Hello and a very warm welcome back to my 6-bed self-sufficiency raised bed project. Today I'm prepping for the heat wave. I have got some plants that I'm putting out, which you can put out plants during hot weather, provided that you give them plenty of water, but I'm not planning to do any direct sowing just because it's going to be so dry and it's going to affect the germination if they dry out. But things have been happening, so I thought I'd get some more things out and also share with you some of the things that have been growing on. And the date today is, just so you can keep on track, June the 23rd, just after summer solstice. If I was to summarise how the garden here was going in general, I'd say pretty well. Some of the things got really wind battered because we had this crazy wind suddenly. For example, these cucumbers, but they're really starting to finally get underway, which is really nice. I've got my squash bed here, so I've got a winter squash, cucumbers, and the courgettes are just starting to come through. So I'm going to make sure I give these a really good soaking. And what I'm also going to do is cut a load of grass a bit later today and mulch a lot of my bigger plants just to help retain the moisture so the soil stays nice and cool over the really warm weather, and it also prevents all of the water that I've put in the ground from then evaporating back out, because really I want the plants to enjoy as much as possible. Now on the whole, I'm pleased with how the garden's coming along, but it hasn't all been sunshine and rainbows. There is one crop in particular that has been struggling. Everything else is going well, but let me share with you one of the disasters, or kind of the main disaster. Now unfortunately here, the Asturian tree cabbage and the Pentland brig kale got attacked by the most unsuspecting pest, rats. So I've pretty much dealt with the rat problem now, and these guys are showing signs of recovery, but it's why I haven't put out more brassicas. So I think after the heat wave I can put out more things like other kales and cabbages, but I am going to risk putting out a couple of perennial brassicas in the back because I've never had a problem with those and rats. But yeah, just a bit, unusual, but I'm just being transparent with what's going well and what isn't going well with this garden. Now, just before the weekend, I spent some time planting out. These are Oregon sugar pod peas, and I've put some pea sticks in. I've created this nice little A-frame structure for them to grow up. And I think there's going to be, a decent amount of nice food here. What I've done is I've planted this on the south side so they create a little bit of shade, just to cast for these dwarf beans. I think it's tender green, the dwarf beans. And then these, which I got from the local garden centre, these climbing beans, which are Blue Lake white-seeded French climbing beans. They looked a lot worse for wear after all of the wind, but they're finally recovering nicely and they're starting to wind themselves up here. So just trying to use the vertical space. Maybe you need to just center this a little bit, but it doesn't matter, it'll fill it in. And I can already feel that, provided that there's no major disasters, there's going to be a lot of food here in a few weeks. And something else which I've done here is I've planted some spare runner beans that I had called Celebration, which I'm going to allow to grow. And this is a perennials bed. So I'm now going to go and plant in a Dorberton's variegated kale and also a keeper's kale, just to give me a load of greenery, particularly over the winter months, which is a key part or a key challenge of self-sufficiency, especially if you have a smaller space. Very often people like to go for all of the summer crops and then forget about what you're going to eat over the winter months. The brilliant thing about things like perennial kales, this keeper's kale and the Dorberton's variegated kale, is that they can be propagated from cuttings, which is how I've propagated both of these, from cuttings from my own plants. So I'm just going to put a couple of these in, and I think that these are going to be quite significant producers of food. What I've already got in this perennials bed is of course rhubarb as well, which I've planted. But because these are going to take a little bit of time to grow, they'll be huge. As long as they continue to grow nicely, they'll be huge pretty quick. But I am growing the vertical layer throughout, so the beans should get through the canopy before these get too big. And I'm also, just for this year, putting a jumbo pink banana squash at the edge there on the sunny side to let that grow out onto the pathway, to hopefully get myself another extra bit of food in this space. I also planted out some boulder and choggia beetroot last week, which are just starting to come through. And I'm also really excited because more of the carrots that I've sown, because I've been struggling with germination this year, but of carrots, but the carrots here are doing really well. So the root veg bed is starting to get there. I have a few plants here that I've grown from seed, including some basil, shiso, which I'm going to plant out, a couple of sunflowers just to add a bit of colour here. But this is an interesting one that I'm adding into the salad bed. This is summer purslane, which is a nice succulent that is a good kind of cut and come again, that I'm going to plant in a block in this edge that will provide a lot of nice leaves to add to the salad that's starting to come through. So I'm going to plant this out here, and I will then do more sowings of the next kind of succession of salads after this heat wave has finished, just so there's a bit of you know, a nice bit of succession. Hopefully, as long as I keep these watered, these lettuce are going to be absolutely fine. So at the end of the root beds here, I'm actually going to quite deeply transplant some leek seedlings that I have, just to let them grow, and then I'll harvest the bigger ones and then let the smaller ones mature. But I'm just going to place them in carefully and give them a really good water, probably do a couple of rows, and kind of just see how they do. The soil is quite dry, so I am going to have to give them a nice big soaking to give them a welcome. Now each bed is following a theme just to help with planning, but it's a rough theme. There's going to be some things that I'm changing around because I'm putting some winter squash elsewhere to allow them to trail over into the pathway space, to use the pathway space. So I've put one in front of those beans in the back there. So it means that actually I might not be growing more squash in this area. So I might put some more beans and peas in this little nook, maybe some more salads, but kind of keep it to a rough theme, but allow myself to not get caught up, because really what's more important is getting plants in the ground rather than having these like little kind of awkward open gaps that then I don't utilize. Overall, I'm happy with how these beds are starting to come together. This is a project that is not just going to be for this year, it's also going to be next year, because you might not expect to make all of the savings, especially starting late in the first growing season, but I want to show you moving into the second growing season, hopefully, as long as this goes, 70% to plan, that is where a huge amount of savings go in, and that is where the investment comes in and starts to give you those returns. So if you're new to this series, I've got a little playlist here just so you can catch up to see what exactly I'm doing with this space.